Well, here's the banjo with new tuners. They're not expensive tuners, but they're nice tuners. And even the 5th string tuner is on there. And the thing that bothers me is this string, when I pluck it, really seems to kind of echo through the body of the guitar or the banjo. The others don't seem to do that. So next is to take this extra bridge and sand it down to closer to 3/8 so I can lower the height of the strings. Welcome to part 4 of building a banjo, and here it is in pieces again. Well, what had happened was I took it with me to a jam session, a little camping jam session, and I was playing my guitar and playing my mandolin, and I bring out the banjo and showed it off, and told a fellow what my difficulty was, and he gave me some advice. So here's what I wound up doing. So I had been considering how I was going to raise the neck. The neck was too low down, so the neck was about here, which is a large gap. I wanted the neck to move up higher to here. I was considering how I was going to go about doing this, and I talked it over with a fellow who's been in bluegrass music for a long time, playing all sorts of different instruments. And when I told him I was considering cutting into the neck, let me make this brighter, cutting into the neck in this location so I could put a notch here, his recommendation was don't notch the neck because that would weaken the neck, very logical, but to make this hole right here a little bit higher on this area. So I'm now taking my files and my rasps, flat rasps, and working at making this hole a little bit higher. And so already it used to be there. You can see how much I've done so far. Already it used to be about there. I'm going to take it up just a little bit higher, and hopefully that'll solve the problem. Here I am working at warp speed again, and I take a little bit off and I connect it back to the neck and take a quick eyeball, and then I take a little bit off and connect it back to the neck until I reach a point where I'm satisfied with it, and put the bolt back in and start reassembling. So now what's going on is my hole is too big for my little wood wedge, and so I grabbed a bit of wooden dowel to form, whittle, and wedge into the top there, allowing my wooden dowel to, or my wooden wedge to take grip. So let's see what happens. Here I'm reworking the part of this dowel to get it to fit into that space right there. You can really see from this angle how much gap I made. So here we go, and it's in. Okay, I'm gonna call that a partial success. I managed to get that in there, that little wedge, that dowel, but still, when this wedge hammers in, it goes below this lip. So I'm going to make myself a new wedge, and that should do it. It'll be a little longer. The nice thing is if you keep your scrap pieces of wood around, you might have a piece that's already in the shape of a wedge. So I'm going to cut this down a little bit and be able to stick it in there. think I'm going to try this piece that came off. Now, I'll probably make this a little smaller, but let's start. I'm going to put an arrow so I don't put it in the wrong way. About this point, you may be asking, why don't you use a power sander of some sort? Well, actually, it was an option, but I decided I didn't want to risk taking off too much material and having to make a whole new wedge. And it's so small, I didn't want to risk my fingertips. I mean, I do play guitar and other stringed instruments, and I need my fingers for that. So let's see where we're at. So here the wedge is in, and the next step is to size the wedge so I don't have a big chunk of wood sticking out the back of the banjo. Now here we have it sized, and that's pretty good there. We'll just kind of clean it up and touch it up. I'm going to use this as a bit of a punch and tap down with a hammer, and that's it. That's good. Action right there. Strings. This is a 1/2 inch bridge. I have another one in case I really screw this up, but if a person was to sand off the feet of this bridge, it would make it a 3/8 inch bridge. Now, I don't think I'll go all the way there, but if I do sand it down to most of the way, leaving a little bit of the feet, I'll of course lower the action of the strings a little bit. Well, let's give it a shot. At this point, I opted to go ahead and use the power sander. I put on some new sandpaper and started at it. One of the things that I was concerned about near the end of this, though, was rounding the feet of the bridge. I ended up taking it down from 1/2 inch, which of course would be 4/8 or 8/16. I initially thought I'd go down to 3/8, but I wound up only taking it down to about 7/16. And here's where I decide to stop, turn the machine off, and move on to just hand sanding it so I have a really flat feet. So I'm going to stop sanding for a second and do a nice flat sanding. There we go, because it does look a smidge rounded. All right, so it's not a full 1/8 of an inch, a little over an 1/8, a little over a 1/16, but it will lower the strings a little bit. Here we are looking at the bridge. Of course, the bridge was a 1/2 inch bridge, and now on this 4th string, not the high 5th string, but the low 4th string, we are now not 1/2 inch, not 3/8, but 7/16. So 7/16. Now, question on that, of course, is where does that leave us at the 12th fret? And so here we are at the 12th fret. It leaves us at about 3/16, which is not ideal. I think ideal is closer to 1/8. But compared to where it was, which was about for about 5/16, we've dropped it down a whole 1/8. And for a banjo that was in parts when I started this project, I'm pretty satisfied. A fella I showed this to this weekend and showed him the progress I'd made, he said, "That's playable." And and that was before I did these final adjustments. That's good stuff. Well, that brings us to the end of assembling a banjo. This was done over the course of a couple months. And after the second time, of course, you saw that I was able to have a playable banjo. But here all the way, we've been able to get a not just a playable, but a really kind of nice sounding banjo out of this whole thing. So following here is me placing the banjo in the hands of a 94-year-old fella from Missouri who grew up playing banjo, and then also placing it in the hands of Curtis Wright, the man who started this whole thing by saying, "Here's some parts to a banjo, go make yourself one." And then finally placing it in the hands of a friend I didn't even know that knew a little bit of how to play banjo, so he just showing off a little. So if you watched through all the sections, thanks for sticking with it. This has been a labor of love, and thank you much for watching.
There's a low green valley on the Kentucky shore where I was getting happy hour of the sitting dancing on my store.